I don't know if you guys have watched the interview of Season of Walsh where he was interviewing Rekgotso Fete, CHIKANE, whereby CHIKANE, Mr. CHIKANE was exposing the MK party for being the worst thing that can ever happen to South Africa. Because you know why? Because they're trying to rewrite history. They're trying to bring the same characters who failed to bring change during their time in power back, and somehow we must believe it. According to him, he's saying the MK party is playing a deceptive type of politics. They're deceiving people, making people be hypnotized in believing that somehow the MK party is the future. While the leadership are so old, they won't even be there in the future. So how is it the future? I'm gonna play a clip and I want you guys to listen to him very attentively. Even you, overly sensitive MK party members, you need to listen to this. You need to hear him, what he's saying. So maybe you can see things from a different light. I agree, you always want us to see things from your point of view as EFF members. At least you guys, you must also see things from outside forces, because maybe you're being misled and you don't see it because you're hypnotized by deception. Take a watch at this very interesting clip.
I'm going to get so much hate for it. MK is the worst thing that could happen to this country.
Hematot.
It is the worst thing. Because it's not that it's a new party that represents a particular region of the country, that represents particular beliefs. I really could care less about parliamentary supremacy. I'm kind of partial to it because I'm like, yeah, maybe parliamentary supremacy could do better if we had a core sense of what justice is. It's the fact that you're trying to rewrite history and we're comfortable with that. That we can rewrite history as if the last 14 years never happened. That the bad actors of the last 14 years were all saints. That our economic system somehow was thriving in the early 2010s. That you could rewrite history to such an extent day after day after day that people believe you at this point. And that is dangerous for our democracy. Right? That is the same thing of someone being like, it was so nice during apartheid. And you're like, no, it wasn't. But like, I was still a child. But I imagine someone's like, no man, I was there. I lived through it. It was not a nice thing to go through. And the country is pretending as if we didn't live through the 2010s, where we had negative growth year on year, unemployment went up, poverty went up, inequality went up, wealth inequality went up. We had load shedding almost every single year except like 2013, 2015, something like that, right? You have Johannesburg. I love Johannesburg Water. We watched Johannesburg Water go from one of the best municipal entities to now going into disrepair during that period. This is not like over the last 2 years. This is over 10 years. You see, we're one of the only countries in the whole world that decided to say, you know what we should really do as a country? Let's sit down and talk about corruption and how systemic it is. And let's have a big commission on this thing. You know how crazy that is? Right? Countries don't do that. They don't sit back being like, corruption is so bad that we need to talk it out now. We went through all of that. We went through SARS being used as a personal bank account. Yet MK gives the image as if that didn't happen. And that I find dangerous. I find it disingenuous, right? I don't mind MK. I think MK is like a good organization. It's multi-party democracy, but that politics of deception, I think is dangerous in this country. The second reason why I really dislike MK in certain instances is they then bring back old people who were the troublemakers before. Right? Or you don't have the wherewithal, and I like that word, to be like, we're not going to have an impeached judge to lead our party. Right? Because that's not where our bar should be. Right? But when you bring the bar down there, what you're essentially saying is that politics the quality of politics is already the pits, and therefore will entrench being in the pits at this point.
Wow.
And that's what I dislike. And for me, it's like, if you're a young person and you've been complaining that politics isn't representative,
Yeah.
that people don't represent you, that the quality of our leaders are bad, that the quality of our democratic discourse is not great, why would you go back to the old hits of the past that didn't do it back then, right? Why would you retreat back to that? Yet they got 14%. And you can't ignore that, right? And they're not going anywhere. I mean, I really hope they go to a conference. I need them to be a bit more organized. But that scares me as well. Now, if MK goes off, they go to conference, they organize internally, they become an actual organization with structures that are tangible, not like by a whim, I think they will be important in our democracy going forward. I think they create that balance of different conceptions of what justice looks like in the country, right? Their arguments, they make the argument that they represent the progressive caucus. And I love that argument. Technically, if the ANC came, it would be 70% and we represent the country. Fully agree with them, right? All the breakaways from the ANC, if they all just went to therapy and got on with things, we could have a very different country, right? So I believe in that. I believe in their policies, or certain policies around how do you extend workers' rights? How do you extend decolonial thought within the country, right? I don't agree with how they talk about legal frameworks of the country. I think it's a bit reductionist,
Sure.
right? But I can look at a party and disagree with certain policies and agree with certain policies, but my issue is not about your policies, it's the people who are there.
And the narrative.
And that you're trying to gaslight me into believing that you were our saviors in the past, we should go back to you. Because that's what gaslighters do. And it's never better. And to retreat back to where we come from, we just consolidated our democracy. Now we want to go back to the past. And if they carry on with that, I think they then become the biggest danger in our country. You keep our country in stasis. You keep our country in the malaise of I know I'm all energetic about this, but you keep us in the malaise of the country that started in around 2004, 2005, up until now. Just 20 years of nothing. Just a World Cup. A World Cup. But in terms of real tangible changes in people's lives, just neither here nor there. So to try and tell us that the people who are instrumental during that period must now also be the people who become the future leader, the potential future leaders of the country, frustrates me. It makes me tired. Also, can we just get young leaders? I just don't understand. I just can't support that type of politics in the country.
Yeah.
And that's my 2 cents on MK.